Morning, dear students. Once again, welcome back to the lesson here. As we had done this chapter, denudation, in the last class also, we had covered half portion of this chapter, and today we continue with this lesson, that is denudation. But here today we discuss about the work of the wind, which is the part of this chapter that we were doing in the last class, that is denudation. Now let's see what is wind. When we say what is wind, wind is the horizontal movement of air. When air moves straight this way, horizontally, front, backwards, from east to west to east, when the air moves this way, either from west to east or east to west, it is called as wind. So therefore we say wind is the horizontal movement of air. It always blows from a cold place to a warmer place. That means wind blows from a high pressure area to a low pressure area always. And along with the wind and the air current which goes up and down, we have circulation of air taking place, which is the main cause for the different climatic conditions that we face around the earth. We have different weather conditions that we experience every day. That is because of the circulation of the air that takes place. It's because of the wind and air current. Air current means when the warm air rises up and cold air sinks down. That is called as air current. Wind is when the air moves horizontally. So along with the wind and the air current, the air circulates in the environment, which results to the different weather conditions that take place around the earth. So here, wind is the horizontal movement of air from a high pressure area to a low pressure area. It is an important agent of gradation. Like the river, which is also the cause of gradation, breaking down the earth's surface. Glaciers also break down the earth's surface. See, waves also break down the earth's surface. Rainfall also is one of the causes. Wind is also a factor which breaks down the earth's surface, which causes erosion, which breaks down the earth's surface. It's an important agent of gradation. The speed of the wind is more in the arid or desert regions because of the following reasons. Now you can see that the speed of the wind is more in the desert regions compared to the areas where there's a lot of forest and vegetation. Now why is this so? It's because mainly in the desert region the sand, the mud is very dry and light, because of which it gets eroded very fast. The second factor is that in the deserts we have no vegetation. Very less trees grow there. Very less shrubs grow there. And thorny bushes grow there. These are the vegetations that are found in the desert regions. Shrubs and thorny bushes. So because of the less vegetation that grows in the desert region also, what happens? The erosion is more. So let's see here. Number one, due to the low rainfall and the rapid rate of evaporation, the soil remains dry, which results to it being blown away by the wind. Because the sand and soil is very light and dry, it is blown very fast. That's one reason for the erosion in the desert, because of wind. Number two, the less vegetation cover in the desert regions helps the wind to blow with great speed. This results to the wearing away of the rock surface by carrying the sand particles with it. Because of the absence of the vegetation, because there's less plants growing there, because there's less bushes growing there, because there's very less trees growing there, what happens? The rate of erosion is more. The sand, the mud is blown more in the desert region because there's no plants and vegetation to block the wind. Number three, the strong winds carry more amount of dust, sand and gravels to a longer distance due to the absence of vegetation cover. See? The strong wind, if the winds are very strong, no doubt the winds will blow with a greater speed, and this will carry the sediments, the dust, the sand, the gravels for a longer distance because the speed of the wind is more. If the wind speed is less, then what happens is the duration that the sediments, the sand, the gravels are carried is for a short duration because of the less speed of the wind. Number four, strong winds fully armed with hard and pointed sand particles can rub a rock's surface and erode them easily. So when the wind blows, the rock particles which are pointed, which are sharp, they bang against the other surface of the earth. They bang the surface of the earth, and as they bang and roll, what happens? They break them down as well. So, see, whereby causing erosion. So, this is how the wind basically acts in the desert region. Because of the absence of vegetation, because it's very dry, because it's very hot and sunny, because it experiences very less rainfall. These are the effects of erosion that takes place in the desert region. You can see here the picture, see, wind erosion. So these are the rocks, see, the surface of the earth that is blown away by erosion. Now here, why are they blown? Is because these areas had very soft rocks. So all the soft rocks are removed, whereby leaving the hard rocks. See, you can see it. Same thing here also, see. The larger rocks are rolling down. The little bit lighter ones roll up, and very light ones move up. This we'll discuss in the later part. See, they are blown up. The fine dust particles, as the wind blows, they are blown up. The little bit bigger particles, they jump. They jump and go. They are blown away. They hop and jump as the wind blows. They hop and jump and they are carried away. But then we have a little bit larger ones, larger rocks and pebbles, where they roll on the surface and they move ahead. So that's how they move. You can see here, see, this was a huge rock, but because of the erosion, what happens, see, all these sections have been reduced because these areas had soft rocks. Erosion took place. Same thing here, see, erosion, because of wind erosion. Here, see, the landscape. So all these have occurred. All these were made because of the wind erosion that took place on the surface of the rocks. Now let's see the erosion by wind. There are basically three ways in which erosion takes place by wind. The first one is deflation. Now what is deflation? Deflation is the process of basically removing, lifting and blowing away of the loose debris from the surface by the wind. That means when the loose particles of sand, gravels, mud and so on, when they are lifted, when they are removed by lifting, blowing, when they are removed by blowing, because they are blown away, they are lifted and blown away, that process is called as deflation. See, it is the process of removing, lifting and blowing away the fine loose debris from the surface by wind, especially in the arid and semi-arid regions. Here again, why semi-arid and arid region? Because there is no vegetation, because there is very less vegetation growing. Because of which, when the wind blows, the wind carries all the fine particles, sediments, debris, along with it, which is called as deflation. So when the wind blows, it carries the fine sediments with it as it moves forward, which is called as deflation. We have another one which is called as abrasion. Abrasion is when the wind blows, it carries the fine sediments with it, and these sediments will bang against the surface of the earth and wear them down, break them down, whereby they become smaller and smaller, whereby some more sediments are generated, whereby they are blown further. That process is called as abrasion. It is the process of wearing off the exposed rock surface by the impact of sand particles carried by wind. When the wind blows carrying sand particles with it, the maximum sand particles are carried just above the ground. That means when the wind blows, the wind carries fine sediments, rock particles, and as these small sediments are carried away, and because the sediments are sharp and pointed, when they bang against the other surface of the earth, when they bang against the rocks, when they bang against on the surface of the earth, what happens? They erode the rocks. They cause erosion. They break them down. That process is called as abrasion, breaking the rocks as they move ahead. And then we have the next one, that is attrition. What is attrition? Attrition basically means when the rocks move ahead, they bang against each other and they become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It's like when the river flows down. The river, when they flow down in the mountainous region, the rock particles are bigger. But as they move down the river, they bang against each other and they become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. That process is called as attrition here also. Same thing with the wind also. When the wind blows, the wind carries particles of dust, sands, gravel, stones, and they bang against each other when they are blown further away, whereby they become smaller and smaller and smaller. This process is called as attrition. The sand particles roll and collide against one another while blowing with this sand. This reduces their size and gets smaller and rounded. This process of wind erosion is known as attrition. The bigger particles move along the surface by strong winds which collide with one another and further reduce to finer sand particles. So as the wind blows, it's obvious that the lighter particles will move up in the air, the little bit bigger particles will jump and hop and move ahead, and then the bigger particles, which are a bit heavier, will just roll on the ground as the wind blows, depending on the size. So that's how we have deflation, abrasion and attrition taking place. That is the erosion by wind. Now let's see the transportation work of the wind. Transportation work of the wind. The wind transports the eroded materials through the suspension, saltation and traction process. See, this one. This I would prefer, this one. This process here. Suspension. See? Suspension, saltation. See? Saltation. Bigger ones, the bigger particles, they jump, hop and move. And then you can see this traction process when the bigger boulders roll on the ground. They are pushed by the wind and they roll on the ground and move. So that is the process. Suspension, saltation and somewhat like traction process. Whereby when the wind blows, because the particles are bigger, they roll on the surface of the earth. That is called as a traction process. You can see here. Okay. Here. Number 2, very fine dust particles are carried for thousands of kilometers. Coarse particles of rocks are carried by wind for short distance. The medium-sized rock particles are transported by bouncing and jumping, which is known as saltation process. When the winds blow, and because the particles of sand, mud, rocks are very small, they are blown in the air. That is called as suspension. The second one we have is saltation. What is saltation? When the rock particles are medium sized, when the sand particles are medium sized, when the sediments are of medium size, and when the wind blows, they are blown, whereby they are lifted and they go on jumping and hopping and they move further. The wind lifts them up as if they are hopping and jumping and they move ahead. That process is called as saltation. But then traction process is when the rocks are bigger in size, the sediments are bigger in size, the gravels are bigger in size, whereby they cannot fly, they cannot hop and jump, but rather they are taken in the air, they are blown in the air. See? But they cannot hop and jump, but rather they roll on the ground. Because they are heavy, they are pushed by the wind, and as they move, they roll on the ground and move. That process is called as saltation. Here. What happens? The fine sediments can be carried for thousands of kilometers. See? And the coarse particles of rocks are carried by wind for a shorter distance. If the rock particles are bigger, they go for a shorter distance. If they are very fine and minute, they are taken for a very, very far distance. They are blown by the wind for a very far distance, depending on the size. Now, deposition work of the wind. You can see here. Sand, dust, rock fragments transported by wind gets deposited when the velocity of the wind decreases or when there is some obstruction. Now we know how the rocks are broken down. See how they are broken down because of the wind. And once the rocks are broken down, they are also transported by wind. They are taken by wind to another place. Now as they are taken to another place, how are they deposited? How are they deposited? Now these sediments are deposited when the speed of the wind goes down, when the velocity of the wind is less. That is when the wind is blowing very fast, the sediments are carried with it for a far distance. But as the wind speed goes lesser, the sediments also start to get deposited. The wind cannot carry the sediments anymore. The winds cannot carry the fine dust, rock particles, gravels, sand and so on. They cannot carry it any further because the wind speed is less. Whereby they go on depositing as the speed of the wind goes less and lesser. If the speed of the wind is very strong, the sediments can be taken for a far distance. But when the speed of the wind becomes lesser and lesser, the wind is unable to carry the sediments any further, whereby they start depositing the sediments as the wind's speed decreases. Number 2. The coarse sand particles or rocks materials are deposited first under the force of gravity. Number 3, the depositing work of wind depends on many factors like direction, velocity of wind, amount of dust particles, sand, rock fragments carried by winds, and the topography of the region. So as the wind blows, like I told you previously, the coarse materials, the bigger particles, they are deposited first. Because they are heavy, they cannot be taken further. And then the lighter ones are deposited later on. Next one, see, the depositional work of the wind depends on various factors like the direction and of the wind, speed of the wind, amount of dust particles that are there in the wind, the rocks, see, the the rock fragments carried by wind. All these are the factors that are responsible for deposition. How strong is the wind blowing? How big are the rock particles? How big are the gravel, sand grains which are carried by the wind? See? Whatever rocks we have, very, very important. See? Amount of dust particles that are there. These are the various factors which determine the depositional work of the wind. Now, features formed by wind erosion. What are the features formed by wind erosion? When the wind blows, various features are formed. Now, what are they? See? Sand dunes are the most common features if you see. The most common features if you see in the desert are the sand dunes. Now these sand dunes can grow in size. They grow in size by say almost a few meters to almost 100 meters they grow in height. The sand dunes are very, very high. And they go on growing as well as they go on moving as well. Let's see. Sand dunes are the most common depositional features produced by the wind in the hot desert or on the sea coast. Number 2, they grow in size by more and more deposits of sand at the same place. They grow in size by more and more deposition of sand at the same place. I told you they grow in size. They go on growing in size as well as they go on moving also. Number 3, some sand dunes in height from a few meters to more than 100 meters. So these are the features that are formed in the desert by wind. Sand dunes. And these sand dunes, are basically, they basically grow in size from a few meters to 100 meters. They go on moving as well. As the wind blows, they go on moving. So there are 3 types of sand dunes. We have this longitudinal sand dune, transverse sand dune, and crescentic sand dunes or barkhan. These are the 3 types of sand dunes we have. Longitudinal sand dune, transverse sand dune, and crescent sand dune or barkhan. Let's see the first one, that is longitudinal sand dune. Now what is a longitudinal sand dune? They are also called a sif dune. Sif is an Arabic word meaning sword. They are also called a sif dune. They run parallel to the direction. If the wind is blowing this way, the sand dunes also move in the same way. They blow parallel to the direction of the wind. See? They form high ridges. With hollow channels at the side. They are long strips of sand dunes. See? They have ridges, high ridges here. But then at the side they have hollows, like drains. These are the longitudinal sand dunes. They run parallel to the direction of the wind. They are long and narrow-shaped dunes extending for a length of several kilometers. They are high ridges of sand separated by sand-free bare corridors. See, they are high ridges of sand. See. And all these ridges of sand are separated by corridors. See, hollow areas, pointed. They are called as longitudinal sand dunes. It is also deposited on the dune through scooping action, resulting in increase in height. So this is the first type of sand dune that we have, longitudinal sand dune, and these sand dunes are formed by the wind, and they are parallel to the wind direction. Wherever the wind is blowing, they form in that same place. They run in the direction of wind, and they are high ridges with hollow corridors. That means they are high on the middle. Again, they are hollow corridors. Again, high. Again, hollow corridors. High, hollow corridors. That's because of the erosion that is caused by the wind. So this is how the sand dunes are formed, which is known as longitudinal sand dunes or linear sand dunes. Next one is transverse sand dunes. Now this transverse sand dunes again is formed by the wind, but they are formed when there is an obstruction. When there is an obstruction by a rock or some vegetation, at that time transverse sand dunes are formed. They are formed basically at right angle to the direction of the wind. See, they are deposited at right angles to the direction of the wind. See, the wind is going this way, but they are this way. The wind is going this way, but they are this way. Right angle to the wind direction. That is because of the obstruction that is caused here. See, because they are blocked here by the rocks. See, or some vegetation. That's how we have the transverse sand dune being formed. So they are deposited at right angles to the direction of the wind. So they are known as transverse sand dunes. Number 2. The formation of such sand dunes take place due to the presence of obstacles like trees, shrubs, rocks, etc. How does this sand dune take place? How are they formed in this direction, in this right angle to the direction of the wind? It's because of the obstructions caused by trees, shrubs and rocks. Barkhan is a special type of transverse sand dune which we'll be studying. Barkhan is a special type of sand dune. See, right angles. The wind is going this way, but they are at right angles. If you see the first one, see, these are longitudinal. Wind is going this way and the sand dunes also running the same way. They are called as longitudinal sand dune. But here, they are transverse sand dune because they are formed at right angle to the direction of the wind. Let's see one example here. Crescent sand dunes or barkhans or barchans. This is the type of sand that is formed there in the desert. Okay, it's a transverse sand dune, and this type of sand dune goes on moving. Let's see here. Okay, so let us look into this here. These are crescent-shaped special type of sand dunes deposited at right angles to the direction of the wind, so they are also known as transverse sand dune. I told you the reason why they call it sand dune is because transverse sand dune is because they are located or they are formed at right angle to the wind's direction. When the wind blows this way, exactly at right angle they are formed. And the reason why they are formed in such way is because of the obstruction by wind, or obstruction by some rock, obstruction by some vegetation or trees or whatever it is, because of which they are formed in the right angle to the direction of the wind. Now, the horns of such a sand dune point away from the direction of the dominant wind. That means they are crescent shaped this way. And because they are crescent shaped, what happens is, see, these two horns, they point away from the wind. The wind blows this way, but the horns are pointing away from the wind direction. That's how it is. In these sand dunes, the leeward slope is relatively steep, concave, while the windward slope is gentle or convex. Barkhans migrate as the sand grains blow up the windward slope and roll down the leeward slope a few meters per year. See, if you see the windward slope, from where the wind is blowing, that side is gentle, but the leeward slope is steep. That is how the barkhans are formed. See? Okay. Then what happens again? From the windward slope, the winds are moving up, they blow up. As the winds blow up, the sand particles are also blown up. And as they are blown up, they are deposited at the windward slope. Again, some more sand particles are blown, they are deposited at the wind slope. So when they are continuously blown from the windward side, this sand that are found in the windward side, all of that is blown up to the leeward side, whereby the sand dune slowly starts to move ahead. Barkhans migrate as the sand grains blow up the windward slope and roll down the leeward slope a few meters per year. The central part of it is high and broad, while the two horns are low and narrow. The dunes are formed in groups, so they resemble waves in the sea of sand. These migrating sand dunes are a threat to the desert life. You can just see it. See? This is the Barkhan. See, it's gentle here, steep in the leeward side, windward side. When the wind is blowing this way, the windward slope is gentle, the leeward slope is steep. These are the two horns. See, these two horns are away. When the wind is blowing this way, the horns are away from the wind. And how do they migrate? How do they move? When the wind blows from this side, from the windward side, the sand particles are blown up. when they've grown up, they fall down and collect here. Again the winds blow. Again the sand particles are lifted. Again they are deposited in the leeward side. When this goes on, these sands all come here. And what happens? The sand dune starts to move ahead. That's how slowly the sand dune goes on moving ahead, because the winds blow the sediments from the windward side and deposit the leeward side. Again they blow from the windward side, deposit the windward side. When this goes on and on, the sand dune slowly by slowly moves ahead. That is how it is so. The height at the windward side is very less, but in the leeward side, this side, the height is very, very high. So this is an example of the transverse sand dune, which is called as barkhans. So dear students, this is the end of this class here, and with this I have come to the end of the chapter as well, derivation. Please read the chapter properly, and I'll meet you in the next class. Till then, thank you, and do study well, and be good at home. Stay safe as well.